pray. Gracious God, we thank you that in your gospel we are one church. We do not walk this journey alone of life, God, that you've given us each other as a body to support, to encourage, to edify, to rebuke, to exhort. God, I pray that this morning as we listen to your word, God, I pray that you would speak powerfully through me in the power of your Spirit. Thank you for the hope that we have in your Son. In Jesus' name, amen. So every year, for the last couple of years, the elders have went on a one-night retreat, generally around February, end of February. The weather's pretty nice. And so we get up there that afternoon around 3 o'clock. We do some praying, and then we always grill steaks. And then after the steaks are done, we go into the evening, and we generally spend to about midnight praying and talking about the church and the direction of the church. And then the next day, we get up fairly early that morning. We repeat until late that afternoon. The idea of this retreat is not to play washers and to hang out. The idea of this retreat is threefold. It's to build unity amongst the elder board. It's where we kind of come in, we hash our differences out. We're kind of locked in the same room. We can't really go anywhere, so we're going to figure it out. Then we pray over the church in its direction. And lastly, we hash out our roles, responsibilities for the year. And we really want to, from this last retreat, we really talked about, we wanted to spend some time. I think Brian did this a couple weeks ago. I'll do it. Gerald will do it. Greg will do it. But as we get up here and preach, we want to start doing a better job of sharing the vision and the mission of the church. And reminding both us as the elder board, and as the church members, where we're going. I know last couple weeks ago, whenever Brian preached, he kind of shared from a high level that we want doctrinal purity. We want community engagement. We want, sound worship and our singing. And he mentioned that each elder has their own unique responsibility and how those things will play into the overall vision and what we operate in. The goal this morning is to help us understand where we are pointing the bow of the ship. We're aiming that ship. And then for the members to climb on board that ship, and let's all go in that same direction by and through the power of the Spirit. For this morning, we're going to hone in on some of my responsibilities. One of them being hospitality or connections. Another one that I co-lead with Greg will be discipleship. And then lastly will be mission and outreach. Now, each one of these topics can be standalone, right? We can have a whole sermon about hospitality, about mission, about discipleship. But ultimately, none of these things stand and function well and to the glory of God without a good biblical foundation. As you heard from Brian, our heart as elders is not to build programs or events. While those might be okay in and of themselves, we desire for us and for you, church, to have authenticity, genuine love for Jesus, Christ-exalting worship services, life together groups with people who share and live as if they have a purpose, and that purpose is to make Jesus known through doctrinal purity, to have joy in Christ and love for each other. Because we do all of those things because of what Christ did on the cross for us. So with that, we're going to look at Romans 12, verses 9 through 13 this morning. Now, I'm generally an ESV guy, but this morning I'm going to read from the NASB on this text. But throughout my sermon, I'm going to flip back and forth, okay? But specifically, I think the NASB does a better job explaining verse 9 specifically. Verse 9 says, "Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor. Not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in the Spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality." We will not touch on all of these exhortations this morning. We're going to focus on verses 9, let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. Verse 10, be devoted to one another, give preference to one another. And verse 13, contribute to the needs of the saints and practice hospitality. So Paul starts out here with 13 exhortations. What is an exhortation? It is an encouragement to do something. So this first exhortation he starts with, it's kind of a broad brush. It says, let love be without hypocrisy. ESV says, let love be genuine. What Paul is really saying is, be sincere in your love. And the word used for love in this text is agape love, which means affectionate regard for or toward someone. So have affection towards someone. You know, if you do your daily Bible reading plan, and today was Romans 12, and you would start reading it would probably take you 2 or 3 minutes to read through that chapter. And then you'd probably spend about 10 seconds on these 5 verses. We generally just blow through it, right? We just check the box. And my point in saying that is this: Paul wants us to take heed here. He wants us to look at this and examine, what does this really mean? Sometimes, probably more often than not, we should practice on our quantity of reading versus our quality of reading versus our quantity of reading. It's okay if you don't finish your plan that day. As you read, you might even read this text and be thinking to yourself, of course we want to be genuine and authentic in our love. And you even might think to yourself, I'm really good at it. I love really well. And you might. But I want us to really pause and ask the question, what is love without hypocrisy? And that word is, what is love that is not fake? Like, really, what is it? And why does Paul see the need to instruct us of this? Why does he see the need to encourage us of this? Because he knows we need to be reminded of this, right? We need to be reminded to be sincere and genuine and not fake in our love toward one another. And I believe the best way that we can really see and define what true love is, what sincere love is, authentic love is looking at the life of Christ. Romans 5:8 says this, but God demonstrates His own love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Let that sink in. While we were yet sinners, while we had no merit, while we were still in opposition to Christ, He died for us. 1 John 4:10, in this is love. Not that we loved God. We did nothing to deserve that love. So in this is love, not that we love God, but He loved us and sent His Son to be the propitiation or the wrath bearer for our sins. John 15, greater love has no one than this, that one would lay down his life for his friends. Then He says, you are my friends. Jesus died for His friends, while we could offer nothing to Him. That, I believe, is what sincere, authentic, not fake love looks like. 1 Corinthians 13 is the great love chapter of the Bible. It says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all the mysteries and knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have and deliver my body up to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. What Paul is saying here is if we did all of these really good things, all of these noble things for the wrong reasons, maybe it's to be recognized, maybe it's to be the hero, maybe it's to be accepted. If I did all of these good things, but the motive is not out of love, there is no profit. It is of no value. Continuing on, verse 4 says, love is patient and kind. Brian talked about this last week at the Good Friday sermon. The Lord's love was extremely patient for us. And the image he gave was as he's on the cross and they're yanking the hair out of his beard and spitting on him, he could have solved it with one word. It just took one word for him. And it would have ended it like that. But yet, he endured that patiently. So love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in the mirror, but then face to face, now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three things, but the greatest of these is love. This week, it did not occur to me until yesterday as I was finishing the sermon, but this week, something happened at my office with my staff, and I was frustrated with them. And I told them I was frustrated. But it didn't stop there for me. I told you I'm frustrated, and I'm going to show you how frustrated I am by not doing something. I'm going to prove a point, right? I was irritable. I insisted on my own way. Now, it's okay that you get frustrated about something, but you could talk it out. You know, I thought about this verse 11. When I was a child, I gave up childish ways. You don't have to reason like a child, Eric. That was me this week. That was one of your elders. Always needing learning, always needing rebuking from the Spirit. And I'm so thankful the Lord does not respond to me that way. Right? Amen? Paul writes to us in Romans 12 as a way of reminder, says, love one another as Christ loved you. Douglas Moo, one theologian, says this about what genuine love is. He says, genuine Christian love that Paul is suggesting here is not a directionless emotion or something that can only be felt and not expressed. Love is not genuine when it leads a person to do something evil or to avoid doing what is right. As defined by God and His Word, genuine love, the real thing, will lead the Christian to that good, which is the result of a transformed heart and mind. So genuine love, remember going back to 1 Corinthians 13, it rejoices in truth. It does not insist on its own way. It is patient. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. So often I think about the church and how divisions occur within the church. And divisions are necessary in the church at times. We see a necessary division in Acts 15 between Paul and Barnabas. It says there was a sharp disagreement there because Barnabas wanted to take with him John called Mark. Paul said no. There was a disagreement. They divided ways. I believe that division was necessary because they had two different missions. They had two different regions they needed to go to. Barnabas and John called Mark went one way. Paul and Silas went down to Syria and Cilicia to strengthen the churches there. But later, Paul recognizes that John, called Mark, was useful for him in his ministry. He even tells Timothy to bring him. He says, bring him because he is useful to me. So divisions can occur, and sometimes they're okay. But oftentimes divisions occur because we don't understand what love is, right? We have this definition of love that's a cultural love. We believe love to be something that makes us feel good or makes us the subject of one's complete affection. And that is not necessarily true. We tend to think about only how we feel, and we do not put God and others in front of our own feelings or emotions. Like, if we're honest, we tend to think in terms like this. You don't love me because you don't do X, Y, or Z for me, and because you don't do those things for me, or the way I would like them to be done, I am upset and I'm going to leave or I'm going to withhold something. I'm going to give you the cold shoulder. And when these ideas creep into our mind, This is what I want you to think about. How am I being patient in love today? Am I insisting on my own way? Possibly that other person is struggling with something. Possibly that other person is hurting, but you're so focused on self that you're not seeing that. John 13, 34 and 35 says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Did you hear that? It says, love one another as I have loved you. We just talked about how Christ loved us. We had no merit. We did nothing for him. We could offer him nothing. While we were yet sinners, while we were still hostile to God, he hung himself on a cross. He says, love as I've loved. I believe that Paul starts off this string of 13 exhortations by this idea of love being without hypocrisy, or love not being fake, because it is the root of what is needed for the remaining 12 exhortations. Like, if we don't get a grasp on what this love is, we will not be able to love others well to the glory of God. So verse 9 says, let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good. The verb abhor here only appears one time in the New Testament, and that's at this time as a verb. And the word abhor really means to distance oneself from, or to have a dislike about something. So it's being used adverbially, indicating the way believers are to love. So be genuine in love by abhorring. So be genuine in love by disliking, distancing yourself from evil. And the opposite of that is you cling to what is good, right? So distance yourself from evil, cling to what is good. We see that Paul is reminding us again in Philippians 4 that we should cling to what is good. He says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Cling to those things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Distance yourself from evil. Cling to those things. How often do we tend to lean in on the bad? Cling to the flaws in a person. When they hurt us, when they frustrate us, boy, we can dwell on those things, can't we? Rather than the goodness that Christ has given them. Verse 10 says, be devoted to one another in brotherly affection. Give preference to one another in honor. ESV reads, love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. After Paul starts off this exhortations with a broad brush of let love be without hypocrisy, we kind of see him narrowing his focus here. What does it mean to be devoted to one another? The term devoted is defined as dearly loved, a familial love. Now, obviously, there are some differences in how we show people affection, right, in the church versus our spouses or our children or even our parents. But the intent here is not the physicality of how we show affection, but rather the intent of the heart's affection toward that person. So we often see church and family as two completely separate things. With our family, we tend to have disagreements and work them out, specifically blood family. So I think about Emmett and Essie. There is no option. They're going to be siblings, and they cannot get rid of each other, right? That's who they are. No matter what the other one does, they have to work it out. In a marriage, the Bible states that what God has joined together, let no man separate. The intent on marriage in biblical terms is not to run from each other when things get hard. But our culture sees it differently. They see marriage as a contract. A good friend of mine who's a lawyer said that contracts are designed to be broken. The whole reason you have a contract is because you want an out. And that's why our culture sees marriage. And I think this is how we see church. And the reason and the root as to why we break our marriage vows is often, but not always, the same reason why we leave the church. Because I did not agree with something, or I don't feel valued or appreciated or loved. It gets back to this wrong idea and definition of what love is. Like, we want something, we want it now, and when I don't get it, I'm out. Or I'm going to ignore you or withhold something from you. There is no working through the conflict. There is no praying and fasting through the conflict together. It's a very me-centered ideology, or shall I say me-centered theology, that leads us to a lack of devotion to the bride of Christ, which is the church. Potentially, that's not you at all. Potentially, you love the church. And you think the church is a great thing and a place to come, only though when there are no competing things for your time. Maybe your view of God is love, God is grace, the church loves me and I love the church, and I will just go when it's convenient for me. What if I told my wife and my kids that I'm super thankful for y'all, Caitlin and kids, but my career, my hobbies, and my friends are going to come before y'all? Would that be a devoted father and husband? No, right? I mean, I would hope you would not define that as a devoted father and husband, right? But yet we act just like this with the church. And Paul is encouraging us here to stop it. He says, be devoted to one another, show honor to each other. Growing up, my family did not attend church often. We attended when we woke up in time or when we felt like it, when the fish might not have been biting that Saturday afternoon and we didn't think we'd catch anything on Sunday morning. It was not a priority until later years once my mother had cancer. And through that is where the Lord pressed it upon us to know Him more fully. And I am so thankful for what cancer did in my life. Now, as a family, we did discuss the things of God. We were not ignorant to them. But there's one thing that was told to me, and you might have heard it, and I believe people are still buying into this idea that I don't have to go to church to be a Christian, and you don't. That is a true statement. Hebrews 10 tells us, do not forsake meeting together, as is the habit of some. And the next verse to follow says, for if you continue sinning. So the author of Hebrews, we believe to be Paul, he writes that with this word for, following, don't forsake meeting, for if you do, you're sinning. So the author recognizes this as a necessity in your Christian walk, to meet together. There might be times when you can't meet, right? Physically cannot meet. My mother, the year preceding her death, lied on her deathbed. She could not get up. She could not attend church. The Lord is not looking for attendance records. He is looking, does your heart desire the bride of Christ or not? When we make a habit of not attending for convenience or being tired or lazy or slothful, or because of competing idols in our life, what that could say about you is that your love for Christ and for God is not sincere. It is not genuine. It is fake. And Paul is encouraging us to not be slothful in our love for Christ or for one another, but rather be devoted to this. You know, Christ designed the church to need each other. Have you ever gotten news or a call one day, bad news, and whenever you get that call, you physically ache, or your heart physically hurts? I'll never forget a Monday in July 2015, my mom was at Harbor Hospice on Major Drive at the ripe old age of 52. By this time, she was literally flesh and bone. My brother and his wife, they were pregnant with my nephew Beckham, flew in from New Jersey. Caitlin was pregnant with Ezra. And we knew Mom's time was coming to an end on earth. We were all there that evening. We kissed her goodbye. She couldn't respond. Dad, as he always did, stayed with Mom at night. And around midnight that night, so July 20th to July 21st, kind of depending on when the call was made, got a call from Dad saying Mom had breathed her last breath, that God had put an end to her physical suffering on this earth. And at that moment, my heart throbbed inside of my chest like someone reached in and was just yanking on it. Even though I knew it was better for her to go and be with the Lord, I knew that, it didn't negate the fact that it hurt. And that is exactly how the Lord designed the body of the church to be. He describes the church as many members but one body. 1 Corinthians 12. For even as the body is one and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot says, because I am not a hand, I am not a part of the body, it is not for this reason any less part of the body. If the ear says, because I am not an eye, I am not part of the body, it is not for this reason any less part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But now God, listen, has placed the members, each one of them, in the body as He desired. If they were all one member, where would the body be? But now there are many members, but one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need for you. Or again, to the head to the feet, I have no need for you. On the contrary, it is much truer that the members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And those members of the body which we deem less honorable, on these we bestow more abundant honor, and our less presentable members become more presentable. Whereas our more presentable members have no need for it. But God has so composed the body. Who composed the body? God composed the body, giving more abundant honor to that member which lacked, so that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now you're Christ's body and individually members of it. If you don't think that's true, ask John Reed about how his body feels right now. And the pain he feels, that's the way we should feel when each other hurt. We were devoted to one another the way a parent is devoted to a child or a spouse should be devoted to a spouse. When the body hurts, we feel it. Paul is encouraging us here to be devoted to one another in such a way that we feel the hurt, the pain, the sick, the injured. And when they are sick and injured and in pain, we don't just cut it off and say, I'm done with you. We mend it. We dress the wound through a genuine love that stems from Christ. Verse 13. Contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality. I believe the ESV does a better job here. It says, contribute to the needs of the saints. Specifically here, seek to show hospitality. He is ending this list of 21 exhortations by the practicality of putting love and devotion into action. He is literally saying, help the saints by contributing to their material needs, food, clothing, shelter. It is our role as a body that is devoted to one another to ensure these things are met for one another. Now, finance is under Greg's purview, but Providence has a line item in the budget for benevolence, and it is generally a decent size. However, that line item cannot be there without the giving from the body. Greg will probably talk about this one of his sermons in the future, but when members don't give, we cannot contribute to the needs of the saints, right? When we talk as elders from the pulpit about money, it is not so that we get our pockets full. right? No one takes a salary. Brian takes a small stipend. But it's not so that we can get our pockets full and you can go finance some other deal for us. It is so that we can be giving to the needs of the saints. It is so this church can be a church that plants churches. It is so this church can give monetary needs to missionaries across the globe that's taking the gospel to the ends of the earth. That's why you give. And if you're a member of this church and of this body and you're not giving, my question is why? You signed a membership covenant, and in that covenant said that you would give of your financial resources, of your time. Let your yes be yes. Seek to show hospitality. In other words, pursue hospitality. Pursue it. It does not come looking for you, is what Paul says. You have to go look for it. Matthew 25:35 says, "For I was hungry and you gave me food." This is Jesus speaking. "I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me in." 1 Peter 4:9 says, "Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace." I want to say, I do think some people are more gifted naturally in the gift of hospitality. However, that does not negate the fact that there's 2 commands to be hospitable that I just read. So if you're a follower of Jesus, devoted to his bride, you are to be hospitable. To go out of your way to do that. So how does all of this fit in? Right? How does this fit into the vision and the mission of Providence Baptist Church? And specifically, how does it fit into connection, mission and outreach, and discipleship? Seth's going to put up our mission statement. It says, this is the Providence Baptist Church mission statement. It says, "We exist to be a family of rescued souls that treasure God above all else, who love as Jesus loved and make disciples of Christ in the power of the Spirit through the gospel of Jesus for the joy of all peoples to the glory of God." I'll read it again with some other words. This is, "We exist to be a family. Hence, we have to be devoted to one another." We exist to be a family that is devoted to one another of rescued souls that treasure God above all else. That means we love him sincerely, we love him authentically, we love him genuinely. Because who loved as Jesus loved? Because he loved us. And we make disciples. You cannot make disciples without being hospitable to one another. It's impossible. You have to know each other. You have to be devoted to one another. And all of those things and the foundation for them are found in Paul's first exhortation, and that is, let love be without hypocrisy. As love being the motivator to be a part of a family, to make disciples, and to be missional, let's be hospitable. Every week, folks come into this church building. And while I might be tied up, or Greg or Gerald, one of the elders, they might be tied up. They might not be able to touch everybody as they walk in. We're not the only members of this church. Only 4 of us do not make up this body. It is our role to meet people. It is not your role to go sit in your seat fully without any interaction. Paul is telling us to go pursue those opportunities. Like, we don't want someone coming into this church that barely gets spoken to and then leaves without any means of connecting with someone within the church. And this is only done through genuine love and sincere love for God and his bride. We want to know each other well enough, and that starts when they first come in. I believe that being hospitable, and this is more of my own personal opinion. This is not necessarily, I think it's rooted in biblical terms, but it's you can check me on it. But I believe that being hospitable is a way to meet the initial felt need of someone. Like, everyone is created and desire to be accepted in some form or fashion, right? I think that's why things like CrossFit gyms and fraternities and sororities and all these other clubs are so unique, because people are going there because they feel a part of something. Not only that, they know what the common mission is, right? If you're part of a CrossFit gym, everyone has a common mission to get healthy. If you're part of the Rotary Club, there's a common mission that you're going to go do certain things. We have a common mission, a common vision for the church, which is to make the gospel known, to love people, to be hospitable to one another. I want to be clear, though. I'm not saying that to accept people in means that we bend on doctrine, right? This is critical. I think our culture says that if you don't agree with me, then you don't love me. If you don't agree with me, then you hate me. Our culture has put this chasm up, says, in order to love me, you must agree fully with me, and if you don't agree fully with me, then you don't actually love me. And that is not biblical. That's not truth. We can love someone, we can accept someone, but not approve of their lifestyle potentially. As folks come in and as they begin to be discipled, as they begin to hear the preaching from the pulpit, as they begin to be engaged in life together groups, as they begin to go into accountability groups and to serve, maybe call your park, they become more grounded in their faith. They start living more missional. They start discipling others because they've been discipled. They start supporting missions and see the need of giving financially so that the gospel can be taken to the ends of the earth. They start inviting more people into their home or going out to dinner with them. All of this is a product of love that is derived by and through the Holy Spirit, which is sincere. So, church, our vision is this. And the direction we're pointing the bow of the ship is to love God by knowing God. Listen to it being preached week in and week out. Pray. Humbly submit your plans to His reign. Abide in His word. Remember John 8:31. If you abide in me and my word, you're my disciples. Love His bride, the church, by being devoted to the church, by showing honor to each other, by giving of your financial resources to help one another, by pursuing hospitality toward one another and others as they come in. And do all this by His Spirit and for His glory, not in your own strength. I think as people get to talking, I think you can generally pretty easily see what they love by how they talk. And what we talk about is an indicator of how we spend our time. It's what we study. Like, I have no issue at any point in time explaining to someone how an option strategy works within their portfolio. And I should be able to just as easily explain and openly discuss the things of God with them and with anyone. John Reed does this really well. You spend 2 minutes with that guy, and you're going to know he loves Jesus. You know? John's an example to see, to learn from. And that is part of the vision of Providence Baptist Church. This morning we're going to sing a new song, at least new for us here, potentially. You might have heard it on the radio. It's called Honey in the Rock. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to think, what is your honey and where does it come from? Like, what is its source? Is your honey work? Is it family? Is it sports? Is it hunting? Is it Jesus? Because as a church, if it is Jesus, and He is the honey and the supplier of the honey, that He is all we need. And we will, as a church, be on that same ship, towing and tugging in the same direction. But He has to be our honey, and we have to know where that honey is supplied from. Now, this sermon has been geared for believers. But if you're here this morning and you don't have a relationship with Jesus, and you heard that Jesus loves you while you're broken and while you're a sinner, and you want to know more about what that love is and what that looks like and how to understand that more, please see myself, Gerald, or Greg after the sermon, and we would love to share with you what that is. Let us pray. Gracious God, I praise you for this day. I praise you, God, for your word. I thank you for the hope we have. God, I pray that as a church that we would not put our hands to the plow and keep looking back. Father, I pray that you give us energy. I pray that you give us strength. I pray that you give us faith and love just to plow the field forward, Father, in the same direction, not tugging against each other. And when we start to tug against each other, Father, I pray that you would help us as brothers and sisters to say, hey, we seem to be going opposite directions, and work that out through prayer, through fasting, through your word. Father, our world so quickly divides, God, but I pray that you would unite us as a body, as a church. God, I pray that we see you as the giver of all good gifts. Every good and perfect gift comes from you, Father, with no variation, no shifting shadow. Every ounce of honey, water, whatever it is, God, is from you. In Jesus' name.